In the past few months, the routines and habits of our daily lives have been thrown into disarray by this global pandemic. It's prompted major shifts in how we go about things in ways most of us couldn't have imagined even just 2 months ago. Dan Ariely is the James B. Duke Professor of Psychology and Behavioral Economics at Duke University, and he is uniquely placed to give us some insight on that change. He joins us now from Caesarea, Israel. Dan, it's great to see you again. How are you doing?
Same here. It's been quite a while. How am I doing? Do you want the real answer, or I'm okay?
Oh, well, we always like to keep it real here, so go ahead, go for the real answer.
So, you and I know each other for quite a few years, and in a regular month, I have lots of ups and downs. I feel hopeful. I feel we're making some progress. I feel there's less progress. Some evil forces. Just the general turns of life. Since the Corona crisis started, I feel the same, only 3 times a day. So
Only
just the
three times a
speed,
day.
the speed in which things are moving from depressing to hopeful to making some changes to realizing what obstacles we have to fight are tremendous. And then one other thing, it's interesting. I talk to you and I look at this picture behind me. I've been basically staring at myself with this picture behind me for 8 weeks now, and and time has just shrunk in such an amazing way. I think because I basically sit on this chair in front of this picture for 2 months, and there's no real been very much variety. I think about different things. I try to solve different things, but my physical life is so similar that it's very hard to figure out how much time has actually passed. So very strange period, very sad, very complex. Also, as a social scientist, very interesting. So.
Okay, that is a way better answer than simply saying, I'm okay. So I appreciate you going the extra mile for us there, or the extra kilometer, as we now say. I want to do a couple things off the top here. I know you've been on this program many times in the past, but I'm not going to assume that all of our viewers have seen you before. And I know sometimes when you give speeches off the top, you explain why you only have a beard on half of your face. So why don't we do that off the top, and then I want to ask you about Israel.
Yeah, so usually people assume that I lost some bet, and that's the reason for the half a beard. No, I didn't lose a bet. Many years ago, I was badly injured. Most of my body is covered with scars. My hands, most of my body, 70%, including the right side of my face. So all of these are scar tissue, no hair. And it looks sort of symmetrical, but not exactly. So that's basically the story. And you're right, it's important to say it up front, because otherwise people keep on waiting for the punchline. What's the point with the half a beard? There's no point. Now we can move to other topics.
Hear, hear. Happy to clear that up. How has Israel fared so far during the pandemic?
So it really depends how you count. In terms of illness and death, we've been doing very well. So it's a small country. We had about 17, 18,000 people who've been identified as sick, and a little bit less than 250 people have died. Per week, our death rate is less than regular, right? So in Israel, on a regular week, about 1,000 people die. In Corona time, it was about 800 people. So we saved lives. But by the way, there's no traffic accidents, there's no infections in hospitals, right? So less people die. But when you say how have we fared, that's one of the big questions of this epidemic. How do you measure? If you measure by casualties of Corona, we fared very well. If you measured about health more generally, it's a much more complex picture. Clearly, we'll have more obesity after this. There's more domestic violence. Depression will certainly go up. Also, there are people who were supposed to have preventative care. There were people who were going to have screen tests of mammograms and so on that didn't have it. So when you think, if you focus on Corona, it's one answer. When you think about health, it's a different answer. And when you think about the economy and how it translates to lots of things, including health, that's yet a very different answer. So we don't know yet. There's
Well, let's
clearly
dive
going to
into some
be,
of those things.
yeah.
And I think in doing so, I guess I should remind our viewers that, you're talking to somebody right now who's in the second biggest country in the world, and I'm talking to somebody whose entire country that he's in at the moment could fit into Algonquin Park. So that sets up the next question. Thus, how are Israelis doing at physical distancing?
So Israelis started incredibly well. So when the corona crisis started, there was a very substantial campaign to ask people to stay at home. There were closure, they closed the school. There was a decision that very quickly to close things. We also have an advantage. We have one main gateway in and out of the country. We're surrounded by countries that don't have a friendly border with us. So the only way in and out is an airport. Closure on that airport was very, very effective. So it was very easy to maintain that. And the rules were very, very strict. Right? That was one of the things. Don't leave home, which is a very, very strict rules. Over time, over the last 2 months, we had some unpleasant episodes that basically have decreased the trust of the citizens in our government. For example, there was an incident where our prime minister and also our president did not keep social distance during Passover, one of our main holidays, and there were pictures of them not doing that. And you can imagine what it does for trust when you have the people who tell you to follow the rules, not following it themselves. So we were in a very reasonable social distancing, following the rules and so on. And then basically it broke together with trust in the government. And there's some other nuances for that, but that's basically what happened. And now, thankfully, the wave is, the initial wave for us is over. There's about 20-25 new cases a day, so it's a very, very small at this point. But the level of adherence now is very low.
Am I right that you are at the moment currently conducting lots and lots of surveys on people's attitudes and behaviors at this time? And if so, what are you trying to find out?
Yeah, so I'll tell you about a little history. So I teach at Duke University in North Carolina, and when the corona crisis started, I started getting calls from all kinds of government offices here in Israel, and at some point I realized I can't really help from afar, so I came, and we started working on things like how do you give instructions that would help people obey them. Then we realized that the education system was not set up for distance learning. And the second question was, what can be an effective learning? Clearly, a teacher in 3rd grade with 30 kids on Zoom is not a very effective method. How can we get some value out of this? Then we realized that domestic violence has been on the rise. Some against women, a lot against kids, right? The amount of pressure, financial pressure, fear of the virus, together with living in small proximity. Then there were questions about how do you put money back into the economy? What do you do with prisoners? What can we learn from work at home? And basically started studying a lot of those things and trying to give advice in as close as possible to real time to adjust the policies. In terms of what we've learned, I'll just tell you about one thing, which is, actually you can ask about more, but to start with, which is how effective has been working from home. And I have to tell you that personally, I've been trying to get organization to do experiments with working from home for a long time because of traffic congestion. So what have we learned? So first of all, we've been studying productivity for a long time. And we've been looking at how are companies treating their employees and how that translates into productivity in the workplace, including how it translates into the profitability of the company and the value of their stock. And what we found was that some things that companies do for their employees are very, very nice, have no impact on productivity. For example, increases in salaries don't matter so much. Fairness in salary matters a lot. Quality of coffee, quality of furniture, like physical conditions don't matter so much. People's feeling of connection with the company are important. Feeling appreciated is important. Actually, we also found that people who feel that if they make an honest mistake, they will not be punished for it is incredibly important, right? Because as a company, you want people to take chances, to try new things, to innovate. And if people are afraid that they'll make a mistake and they'll be fired for it or punished, then they're not going to try new things. And we think about all of those things as goodwill, right? Like you can give people a contract, but that defines the minimum level you have to work in order not to get fired. But what we really care about is people having their hearts and minds into the workplace, not just the minimum, but the max. How excited am I to work? And that max is not defined by your contract or by the quality of coffee or furniture. It defines by, do you feel connected to the company? Do you feel connected to management? Do you feel the mission of the company is important? Do you feel that you are appreciated? Do you feel that honest mistakes are valued? All of those things get people to perform at a high level. And at Corona time, all of those things became more important. Why? Because all of a sudden we're distracted. We have other things to do. We work from home, there are kids, there are distractions, all kinds of things to do. How much of our attention do we choose to redirect to things that have to do with our employment? That goodwill became even more important. So companies who are good at that have been much, much more successful, and companies who are not good at it did not get a lot of value from their employees at home. We also found that people do work a little less, but not a lot less. The companies who are doing very well, people work less, half an hour less. But by the way, they save a lot of time on commuting. We also found that people do spend more time, quality time, with their loved ones, and very happily, people don't want to give that up. Like if you tell people what's an ideal allocation of time, people do say that they realize now that quality time with loved one is very precious, and they would like to keep more of it. So that's on the employment side, and the question is, if the Corona crisis would last for a while longer, and the different versions of it, there's the virus, there's the economic downturn, all of those things, how are companies going to actually tackle that? And if I can say one more thing about this, in this crisis, there's lots of inputs. There's lots of things that make it worse. One of them is stress. I think on the first time I was on your show, we talked about learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is this idea that if you suffer negative shocks, in pain, electrical shocks, unpleasant things happening to your life, and you don't have any control over them and you don't know where they're coming from, our ability to cope is much, much, much lower. But when we know what's coming, when we have a roadmap, we understand what's going on, we're in a much better position to sustain the same negative news or the same negative impact. And Corona time is very confusing. We get different results from science and what's happening in different countries, and it's very confusing. And are they opening? Are they not opening? Are we suffering? And so on. There's lots of confusion. And at work, there's extra confusion. Would we get to keep our jobs? Would we not? Are they laying off people? So the amount of stress is incredibly important. And one important question is how to reduce that stress. How do we go to the people who work with us and say, don't worry? Or if we can't say it because it's not true, how do we say, here's the action plan, and here's when you'll know things, and here's where news would show up, but you don't have to live with uncertainty of when will they tell me how to do that. So to the extent that we can communicate action plans, to the extent we can communicate some certainty, to the extent that we can communicate to people that we're trying to take care of them, just so they know, all of those are incredibly important. In our efforts with kids, by the way, we also found that kids lost a lot of control. Kids who used to go and play are right now incredibly constrained, and they're being told what to do many more hours of the day with much less flexibility. And one of the things we suggested for the education system is to give kids more freedom to make choices. Would you like to study this in this way or in this way, now or later? And even some kind of freedom is very, very helpful.
Well, let me follow up on that angle, because it's a terrible thing to engage in stereotypes, but I'm going to do it here anyway, just in the hopes of making a point, which is to say that it has always been my impression that the people of Israel are extremely independent in their thinking, and just because a government tells them to do something doesn't mean they're going to do it. We see a lot of that in the United States today as well. Not so much in Canada. We actually, in the main, are doing what our governments are telling us to do. I saw a study recently that suggested that in the United States, if even 80% of the people, not all the people, but if 80% of the people wore masks, the rate of infection would plummet. Having said that, as evidenced by the guy in the Oval Office, there's lots of people who are never going to wear a mask under any circumstances whatsoever. So here's the question. How would you convince governments, I guess, what's the strategy they should employ if they want to get people to do things which people don't naturally, or maybe under almost no circumstances at all, would ever consider doing?
Yeah, so first of all, there's a question of trust. And if you're in a government that has very little trust, or if you're, a president of a company and 50% of the people think you're an idiot, that's not going to work out, right? The idea about following suggestion, request, whatever, has to be based on some basic trust. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, not in everything, but in Corona, we're being asked to behave carefully, a lot of it for other people, not for ourselves. Right? Think about young people in the US. Their odds are becoming very sick is not high. If they are wearing a mask, it's to help the economy in general. Right? It's a public good problem. Right? You personally, let me give you a more extreme example. Imagine you're a low-income person in the US, and imagine that you're a daily worker. You drive Uber or you deliver something, but you get paid day by day. And one day you wake up and you have fever and you're coughing, odds are you have Corona. If you stay at home and quarantine yourself, you'll get zero income, but you'll help other people. If you keep on delivering food or whatever you do, very likely you'll infect lots of other people. What would you do? Right? Would you take the personal sacrifice for the team? And in the US, we see it's not happening. Right? There's no feeling of camaraderie. The thing about the Corona crisis, for me at least, it showed how connected we all are and how fragile we are. But if you have an ideology of individualism and that we're not connected to each other and every person does what's good for them, then somebody who is sick like this is not going to say, I'll give up my income for the next 2 weeks to help save other people. I don't want to say a curse word, but you say, it's me, and let me just do what's right for me and not care about other people. So I think trust in the government. I think caring about other people, like public good. And then if I gave you the other pieces of it, is that any instruction like this has to make it easy, that you understand what's in and what's out. For example, social distancing as a word, it's not good enough. What does it mean? 6 feet is not sufficiently helpful, because what do you do in an elevator? Right? So we have to kind of help people figure out how this works. Think about religion. Religion gives you very clear rules, right? They don't say 80% of the time do this. They say 10% of your money go to charity. There's no question. They give you very, very strict rules. And then we also have to make it seem socially the right thing. A lot of our behavior is not driven by what's right and wrong morally. It's driven, or legally, it's driven what the people around us are doing. So if you live in the States and you see your president not keeping social distance, it's not going to work out that lots of people will say, let me do it. If you get examples from people around you who are misbehaving, that's going to become the perceived norm, and people are not going to behave well. So to get good instruction is actually very tough, and you need lots of elements to play out.
Dan, we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to tackle 2 more issues if I can. And the first one, I just want to read you something.
Is this your nice way of telling me to hurry up?
I'm Canadian. Yes, that's how we do it. It's a nice way of doing it. There's a rather iconoclastic journalist in Canada by the name of Jonathan Kaye. He's kind of hard to pin down. He's not exactly right-wing. He's not exactly left-wing, but he's very iconoclastic. And he wrote the following: I find the lockdown debate so phony. It's been fueled on both sides by the presumption that government decrees work as a sort of magic wand that will bring our economies and perhaps the most acute phase of the pandemic back to life. But the data suggests there is no magic wand. Much of the lockdown effect was imposed not by top-down fiat, but through millions of small decisions made every day by civic groups, employers, unions, trade associations, school boards, and most importantly, ordinary people. I'd just like you to react to that if you would. Do you think he's onto something there?
A little bit, but I think he's mostly wrong. I think the of course it depends which government you're talking about and how centralist they are, and also there's a question of whether the government speaks with one voice, like in Israel, or with many voices, like the U.S. But a lot of herd mentality is built on small things. Right? Think about any kind of like you go and play soccer, and the riots that start by something very small that then just plays out. So yes, at the end of the day, government doesn't control everything, but they can help dictate the direction, and that makes other things follow. So if you look at all the little events, you could say, oh, yes, lots of little things happened, but they are much more likely to happen if there's a real direction from the government. And if there isn't, they're less likely to coalesce around that agenda. So yes, eventually there's lots of action. But what's the starting mechanism? What's the main thrust that aligns it? I think a lot of it has to come from the government.
Understood. Okay, you know the expression, of course, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so I want to finish up on that. What opportunities, given the crisis that we're in right now, ought we to be availing ourselves of, which under normal circumstances, perhaps we couldn't get that kind of transformation?
So there's many, I'll give you 2. I think a time of crisis could have been a time of something across countries, where the US could have helped China, the China could have helped the US, Canada could have helped Italy. I mean, there's lots of opportunities for help across countries. This is the time where friendship can be built, and reciprocity and so on. Between the US and China, I don't think it's going to happen, but it would have been a great opportunity. It would have been an opportunity for the World Health Organization, for the UN, to become stronger powers, because we're all in it together. Maybe a more mundane one, and one that I think is more likely, is for reform in the education system. So I'm 53. It was a long time when I was in first grade, but when I was in first grade, I remember they told me, very soon education will change. It's been a teacher in front of kids for a long time. Every day now it's going to change. No, it's still the same. But now we had a few months of distance education, not good one, but we had a few months of distance education. And we understand that it's good for some kids and terrible for other kids. And we understand technology can play a much bigger role in education. And we're also not going to have money. And education is incredibly expensive, and it will certainly shrink. So I think the lack of money in education, realizing that you have to be prepared for some kind of distance education, will force us to create the right kind of reform for education, where kids could study in their own pace, in their own version, in all kinds of ways. We have lots of ideas about what will happen, but I think the combination of realization that it can happen and the financial constraint that would necessitate a different model together would create a much better education system.
We shall see. Dan, we are always so grateful when you take our calls and spend so much time with us here on TVO. Let's hope we can continue to do it for many years into the future. In the meantime, be well, stay safe, and take good care. Shalom ve'litraot.
Shalom, litraot, and the same to you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.